Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good, quick break. We're glad to have the next session to start. Over to you, Conrad. Thanks again, Conrad, for a great session, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I have the pleasure to introduce you to our next speaker, and the title you can already see here, about Integration and Project Management Center of Excellence. I look forward to this presentation, Emma, I have to tell you. It's going to be exciting. And let me quickly introduce the next presenter, Emma Barton, to all of you guys. She is at AstraZeneca, the Director for Alliance and Integration Management, and is a very senior business development professional with over 15 years of industry experience, and in particular, a track record of successful transactions. So you actually prove me wrong of successful transactions and post-deal management. So you have broad business development experience spanning search and evaluation, transaction, and on top of it, strategic alliance management. Your current focus is on deal value delivery from M&A and divestment activities, so covering both sides, to ensure efficient asset and business transfer across the US, the European Union, and many other international markets. I look forward to your presentation, Emma. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Conrad, and thank you for an excellent presentation. You set the bar very high for me. So what I hope to do today for folks was really give you an insight into the journey as an alliance and integration management team that we've been on at AstraZeneca to really build capability and ensure that transfers across our enterprise. So I've added a slide for those that are not so familiar with us. These are our key stats, but essentially we're a large global pharmaceutical company with interest in novel pharmaceuticals and interests across three key therapy areas, which are oncology, cardiovascular and metabolic disease, and respiratory inflammation and autoimmune. And if you look at any figure on this slide, it's probably the one at the bottom left here, which is our collaboration revenue. And that just gives you an idea of the amount of money that we typically generate within a year, just from one aspect of our business development activities, which is the divestments. Now, partnering is a cornerstone of activity in our strategy at AstraZeneca with good reason. So if you look at the timing of the life cycle of our products, from concept to market, it's easily 10 years as a minimum. So organic change in our portfolios does not happen at any fast rate of activity. And business development is really one of the key levers that CEOs have in the pharmaceutical industry to affect a change in the shape and composition of their portfolios. So it really comes as no surprise that us, along with many big pharma, are particularly active when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. And I did a quick tot up. Since our current CEO joined us, we have participated in over 12 major product franchise and company acquisitions, and it's actually 25 major product franchise divestments. So we really have a lot of experience of moving assets between portfolios. For us, acquisitions tend to be more bolt-on acquisitions than true mergers. And we've had to move assets across all life cycles of our products. So that involves active clinical trials. It involves products that are near to launch. It involves products that are a very mature commercial stage of their life cycle. And as the map of the world here picked out in gold, it is trying to illustrate for on-market assets, we have transferred activities across a large part of the globe. So if I slice and dice this is our boast sheet. This tells you some of the most of the major transactions that we have carried out since those times. And I've plotted that really against kind of the timeline and in a deal spectrum. So at the bottom end of this slide, really what would be the pure inbound activities of acquisition, moving through to more in-licensing, collaboration as we get to the centre, and then where the assets actually mirror that, but in the outbound sense. So right at the top of this slide, we're looking at assets that have been moved across in a divestment context. And this really is designed to give you an idea of the volume of deals that we carry out in any given year. And these are all pretty substantial in size. And so for us, it's not really just striking the deal that is important, but actually the post-deal management service that we provide to our partners. And it's particularly important for us in the divestment area because we want to make sure that we maximise the opportunity for the partners to really deliver on the business cases that they have set. And I think one of the marks of success for us is if you look at some of these company logos, we actually see a number of repeat customers that come back to us having experienced an integration that has been partnered with AstraZeneca, and they want to partner with us again. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail, but to give you an idea, lots of logos is one thing, but actually what the scale of those transactions, and I've called out 4 of our key acquisitions. These have all got kind of nuances. Every deal and acquisition has its own set of considerations and sensitivities around the business case, whether that be the stage the asset's at, and whether that's at a very delicate stage in its development, and we need to pay a lot of attention to how we integrate that, not to disrupt the development timelines, such as at our Acerta Pharma, where we had products that were near to launch, through to I guess the Bristol Myers Squibb diabetes franchise acquisition that we did, which was one where really one of the key aspects to this was the sheer number of personnel that joined the AstraZeneca family from Bristol Myers Squibb. So some 4,000 people joined us. 2,500 of those joined on day one, and that was after a 6-week period between signing and closing of the deal. So it gives you an idea of the scale and the complexity of some of the deals that we're handling, and an idea of why we have to have a very strong capability within AstraZeneca to execute on those deals. When we do these, we have an alliance an integration management lead assigned to the program, and they are supported by key functional experts that report into their own particular functions, but those individuals are dedicated to supporting post-deal management, and they're experts in not only their field of expertise, but also in how to move assets between portfolios. And so we have that infrastructure set up in our organisation. In terms of the alliance and integration management teams, we have 3 teams that span the life cycle of our products. So at one end, the late stage development team, which is where I'm focused. There's 6 of us in that team, and we support the major acquisitions from approximately phase 3 identification onwards through to the end of commercial life for that product. And then we have 2 teams aligned to the 2 business units within our early stage organisation, and they are a similar size to the late stage commercial team. Our boundaries are somewhat flexible, and probably what will become a theme of this talk is how we try to retain flexibility, which is particularly important for our resourcing. We work very collaboratively between the teams, and this isn't a hard barrier. We really use the flexibility to try and make sure that we can provide development opportunities for individuals, and we can also flex the resourcing in terms of capacity and capability in the teams at any one time. So hopefully I've given you a flavour for the activities that are going on, and what you can probably appreciate is how important it is for us to have a very strong integration or transition capability within AstraZeneca. And that was something that we've had to build over the course of the time since Pascal joined us, and our deal making has become so prolific. And one of the first things we looked to do when we resourced this model was really make sure that we had the right people involved. And regardless of where our key professionals sit within the organisation, if they are supporting our customer activities and our transitions and integrations, we really want them to have a very strong skill set, and that's common across all of these functions. So we're looking for people that are particularly strong people managers, and the reason for this is twofold. We not only want them to be able to work and strike up relationships with our partners, but they also have to be able to build an enterprise-wide network. In the pharmaceutical industry, when we're integrating or we're transferring products between portfolios, those are typically highly regulated and cross-functionally dependent activities. And if we don't do that in the right way, we risk supply to our patients, which is just unacceptable. And so we have to have people that are very good at operating across all functions. They have to be pragmatic, look at problem solving, and they have to have a strong appreciation of the cross-functional dependency of all the activities we have to carry out. And so we really look to have people recruited into those functions that really have those skill sets. As Alliance and Integration management team, we're particularly lucky that we sit and report in through the same management line as our transactor colleagues. And that has allowed us over time to be able to get an earlier and earlier involvement in the partnering process itself. And that really does pay dividends, we've found. Typically, I would be involved in a major transaction from the term sheet stage, and that allows me to contribute to the partnering, to the contractual process and setup, because what I can do is bring the experience to bear that we have across the team and make sure that we've tried to gain as much contractual clarity as possible, and in that contract anticipate what are likely to be the key transitional issues when we're looking to bring the assets into the company. It also gives us a chance to assess the cultural and operational fit between buyer and seller organisations. And that's key. And as we've heard from Conrad, it can be a crucial element to delivering on your business case. When we look at risk, we really consider human risk as one of the biggest factors. And so it's important that we take these assessments, understand the partner that we're dealing with, and make sure that we can design governance, decision-making routes and processes, and ensure that we're really fitting ourselves up early on so that we can be operating in the most optimal way to deliver the transition of the assets. But what we had to do fairly early on was consider how we actually resource some of the support teams that help us. And when we carried out the assessments to do this, it became evident that we weren't going to be able to come up with a model of resourcing where one size worked for everyone. And if you kind of look at my graph, which is a very crude I guess, depiction of where effort is in the process of the integration life cycle, that becomes less surprising. So on one end of the spectrum, we have the poor supply guys, which is picked out in this blue line. And these are the guys that are really in it for the long haul. Their planning kind of ramps up fairly early on, and their maximum effort, which is what this y-axis is designed to show, really continues for a very long time and doesn't start to drop off until, if we think of a mature brand product, when we start to move the market authorizations between the companies and move into a business as usual stage. And then the real drop off in their resourcing comes when actually we manage to transfer into the business the packaging, of the product into our normal systems, and then again the formulation of our product. And this timescale for them can be anything from 3 up to 10 years, depending on the complexity and the nature of the deal. So they really are in it for the long haul. At the other end of the spectrum, you see the yellow line, and I probably misrepresented our IT colleagues slightly here, but really this is a function where there's a very short, sharp involvement and a very high lift over a short period of time. They will typically be involved very early on in making sure that we have large data sets and work streams moved across in a highly compliant way. And that has to be done and in place before we start moving the legal responsibility for the asset. And so their work tends to tail off in a much shorter time frame, which could be anything from 3 months to 9 to 18 months, depending again on the complexity of the assets that are being moved. And then the remaining functions kind of, I would say, take something of a middle ground. Our work ramps up and it's really medium stage in terms of our effort and our timelines there, and tends to drop off as we move legal responsibility between organisations. So what we had to do was really find a way to resource the capabilities that were going to support the Alliance and Integration Management team. And I just want to look at a couple of these functions and talk to you about the approaches that we took here. So when we did our assessment of the regulatory and patient safety teams that are key to moving some of our assets across when we either integrate or we transition, what we found was that there was a need for a very specialised market and legislative knowledge. And that information and legislation is changing at a very rapid pace across the globe. So there was no way we could replicate that by centrally held information repositories. It's something that's evolving and we need to be understanding. And that meant a high level of project management was required for these particular functions. And that's driven by market interactions, a high level of coordination that's required between markets, but also between different support functions within those markets. We found that the resourcing level required to support our deals was very highly dependent on the size of the deal, the numbers of deals that we had ongoing at any one time, and also the deal complexity. But counter to that, the recruitment of staff that actually hold the appropriate level of experience and specialised knowledge was problematic. So it wasn't something we could address with a short-term contractual arrangement. And what that led us to do was set up Project ERA. And this is a long-term flexible resourcing partnership that we have with IQVIA. And they provide us with regulatory and pharmacovigilance skilled colleagues and project management resourcing. And they do that on a project-by-project basis. They support a small dedicated team of in-house integration and transition experts. So we typically have 3 people in each of those teams in regulatory and patient safety that cover those deals that you've seen earlier in the slide decks. But the actual project management and hands-on work is carried out by our extended IQVIA family. And that has proved to be a particularly successful model that allows us as AstraZeneca to flex our resourcing as we need it, but also works for our partner because it is a very long-term commitment. To give you another example of the way that we've looked to resource some of these, I mentioned the supply guys that are really in this for the long haul. And the difference here was, rather than requiring a flexible and agile resourcing model, actually what we needed to find was people that had a very long-standing tenure within AstraZeneca. Specialised knowledge was one thing that we needed in these individuals, but actually it wasn't really just that. It was specialised knowledge of AstraZeneca's methods of operation, our demand forecasting, our supply and distribution. But most importantly, what we needed to have was individuals that had a sufficient level of standing and seniority within our organisation to be able to influence our senior leadership and stakeholders. One of the reasons for that is on the divestment side of our business, where we are transitioning assets to another partner. Very often those individuals are the representative of our partner on some of our most senior governance bodies, and they have to be able to influence and represent the best interests of our partner where we find that we're having portfolio-wide supply decisions being taken. Given the extensive timelines on all projects, what we did here to try and resource our organisation was actually to set up an internally dedicated supply transition team. And so the 3PS team was set up, and this is a team of approximately 10 individuals, and they're tasked to manage third-party supply between AstraZeneca and our commercial partners, whether that be coming into our organisation or moving out of our organisation. So that gives you a flavour of how we kind of strategically went about trying to resource that. But of course, having people in place is only the start when it comes to building a transition capability. We can't possibly resource the model to the extent where we can cover everything. But what we do want when we have partners coming to AstraZeneca and when we're interacting with partners ourselves is the ability to be confident that when we're integrating something, we're doing it in a very consistent way across our organisation. And we try and do that by putting together and constantly iterating tools, starting points, information, training packages that are generated centrally and distributed out across the organisation.
There is, if I may, a quick question.
Yeah, please do.
From Mark from Sanofi. Hi, Emma. Thanks for your excellent presentation, full of good insight. For a complex portfolio divestment, 20 plus countries, how long does it take for your company to prepare and organize the closing?
So between signing and closing of a deal, sometimes that happens concurrently and sometimes that happens within a few months. The transition itself we use the time between signing and completion to actually start our planning. So when we hit day one, where we can actually get going, we really are operationally set to start executing on the plans. And typically, it depends really where in the world you are when you're moving assets, because a lot of the time frame is determined by the regulatory authorities themselves. But typically, that would take, I would say, around 2 years. To do that if you're considering a mix of countries that cover a worldwide representation.
Thank you.
So yeah, and then please do chip in and ask questions as we go along. I'm coming to the end of the presentation, so I hope I've got left lots of time for questions. So as I say, what we try and do is have these starting points, the tools, the templates, and we try and work with the wider enterprise to get feedback on those, make sure they're living documents that get updated, where we hold information repositories, try and update those with every single transition that we do. To try and keep our information as current as possible.
We actually have another comment / question from Michelle from BASF. Hi, such tools, are they made once for all deals like templates, or are many of them made project by project depending on the division, etc.? We have many tools and templates, but often use them as a reference only due to each deal being different.
Yeah, absolutely, Michelle. I think you make a good point. I think we don't like to say templates, we like to say starting points, because ultimately everything, or whilst we start from a starting point, that will automatically get iterated as along with the deal and how that goes. But we do find a starting point is helpful because there's a lot of commonality between different integrations and transitions.
He has a follow-up question. Are they for all functions, or each part of the involved functions hold their own templates or data material?
We try and hold them as centrally as possible, because what we want to do is make sure that they're available to our marketing company, business development teams as well. So very often we find that the functions themselves have developed and generated templates. And then what we do is try and put those in a central repository so that they are available. The functions themselves would be responsible for updating those. That's part of what we do. We also build in a shared learning at the end of each of our major transitions as well. And we try and do that with the external party where possible, and where they have an appetite for that, because what we're interested in is improving each time the way that we interact with our partners. So we want to have very candid feedback from them in how the experience have been and what we can do to improve that. I hope that helps answer the question.
Yes, thank you. And there was a quick one from Teresa from Danfoss. How do you do the quote unquote shared learning?
We have, prior to COVID, we've met up we've taken the, I guess, the key leaders across the various functions involved and that have been most pertinent to the divestment. What we've done is met with the counterparts within our partner, and we've done that in a face-to-face setting. We kind of have some pro forma, and we ask them to break out and really be very honest about brainstorming the challenges that they experienced, how they overcame those, and if they had to experience that again, how would they tackle that in a different way? And then we assimilate those back and build that into the practice for next time, and in any of those kind of guidance documents that we have.
Given the duration of your integrations, how do you do regular lessons or learnings, lookbacks?
So if it's a shorter transition, such as it might be a couple of years, and for us that's quite short because it can take a long time to move assets, then we typically do one shared learning at the end of an end point in the deal, and we would typically consider that to be where we turned over the legal and commercial aspects and responsibilities between the organisations. If it's a lengthier relationship, then what we typically look to do is do that throughout the course of the transition. And in a similar way to how you'd manage an alliance, if you find yourself that you come up with a particular issue that has touched a number of functions, then actually once that has been resolved and the dust has settled slightly, that's also a really good time to actually bring the teams together and really talk about what happened and how we might resolve those differences in the future and how we should have handled that previously.
There's one more question, and then maybe I'll ask if the rest can refrain until you're finished with your presentation. Do you have any performance metrics for your team? Are some of these shared with the business teams, and have you experienced any challenges in keeping priorities aligned?
I guess it depends very much, and it depends is probably a common theme here. So I think in terms of your performance metrics, I think it comes down to what are your sensitivities in your business case, and what does it matter most to preserve? And really, the performance indicators that we're looking for really centralize around those aspects. If it's a case that we really need to have an integration carried out by a certain time, you've got a clear timings performance indicator there. And I have one integration I'm running at the moment that is very much time dependent, and actually the key deliverable is making sure that we get the transition occurred into the AZ business at that time. But actually you might find you have other drivers. So one might be that you actually don't want to integrate quite so quickly. You might want to just preserve business continuity for a period of time, and that can be particularly important if you're at a sensitive development stage for an asset. So for example, if you're due to launch within a short time frame, really adding more pressure to an organization to start grappling with new ways of working, new systems and processes, it's probably not the pertinent time. So it really comes down to how you value the assets and what's the levers there for actually delivering on your business case. Another example would be, if you have an asset that's heavily tied up with the knowledge and personnel that have developed it, I mean, really then you're looking at performance indicators around retention, and particularly around retention as you come out of any kind of retention scheme timelines as well.
Great.
Brilliant. So this is actually my last slide, so I'll be very quick and then we can open up the floor. So in order to kind of promote lots of the starting points and tools and really try to make this an enterprise-wide community, we've really tried to take advantage of every internal platform that we have to do that. So we have Nucleus, which is our kind of internet loading front pages. We have specific sites there which really give people a basic start to how to in these. If the first time you find yourself working on an acquisition, you can click there and go and find some guidance and introduction and basics to get you started before you actually enter into your particular project yourself. We have an internal Facebook called Workplace. We have established pages there that really form the hub of our alliance management community. And there we encourage dialogue, not just from those central functions that support, but also our in-market business development teams who will be doing deals that are really country-based. But again, the same principles apply. And we want to use that very much as a forum for people to develop themselves, to get a wider understanding of the business strategy and what drives us in our deals. It comes in very useful because actually we see people wanting to develop themselves by way of secondments. It helps us have some cross-pollination when we're interviewing for different alliance professionals. And most importantly, although I have put it as the last bullet, it gives us a really good platform to reward and recognise people that go the extra mile. And this really speaks into that cultural element and that people element. If we value partnering as part of our strategy, we also have to very publicly reward and recognise those people that go well outside their normal operating procedures in order to deliver on those post-contractual elements. And so we have a number of initiatives where we really look to do that, and we use these forums for that. I think that pretty much concludes what I was going to say. If people have more interest in the activities at AZ, we have a number of papers published, and that's on the slide. The last slide there, you can always look those up and have a read. You'd be very welcome to contact me through LinkedIn, and we can have a chat too. And I will open up the floor now for questions.
Yeah, Emma, there is actually a question from Pakebat, M&A and Integration Project Leader Sanofi. The question is, did you develop those materials in-house or with consultants, that helped you to create the starting point, right?
No, we develop them ourselves through experience. Yeah.
Well, it's in-house developed. Yeah. And Pete Kelly, Senior Director, Corporate Development, Norgine. So now we get so many new questions. I actually, yeah, exactly. Norgine. Hi, Emma. Great presentation. The urgency of integrating a company or asset portfolio with ongoing sales versus development stage. Asset. What is it? It's actually paging back and forth. Stage. Asset can be very different. How do you set up the teams differently for each? And does your own team responsibilities vary?
Yes, I think it does. I mean, if you have a commercial asset, which is probably the ones I'm most usually involved with, I mean, the key factor is obviously not to disrupt supply to patients. And really there, we want to make sure that we have everything moved across in a very planned, a very compliant way. And a lot of that heavy burden then comes down to our regulatory teams. Information technology colleagues are fundamental to this. They have to make sure that we're getting all the historic safety information across, all the historic regulatory information across, and we can make sure that we know and we're confident that we have a complete copy of that's identical to what the originator had within their original system. I think they're probably the fundamentals. We then obviously have the in-market aspect, and so you have a lot wider commercial footprint, and you have a lot more management across the commercial organisation throughout our marketing companies to deal with. On the other side, when you're integrating a clinical program, again, we still want to make sure that we're doing that in a very planned and compliant way, and that we don't disrupt access to medicines for any patients that are on those active trials. But actually the lift is lower in terms of regulatory IT because they don't have the historic background behind them. And typically there we do obviously have a regulatory component, but actually what we're doing there is really building a very central team that will be taking on the development. We call those global product teams, but they're cross-functional teams that will actually be having a lot more emphasis on evaluating the clinical trials, carrying out the site feasibility studies, and really understanding what AstraZeneca can then bring to those assets, and whether there's changes we can make to the trial design or additional sites or things that we can do to really accelerate that.
Excellent, Emma. Robert, looking in your direction, we still have 2 questions left. Should we take them? Or
yeah, let's quick questions, quick answers.
So, okay. Michael from BASF asks, how much do you really rely on external support during post-merger integration consultancies?
We don't use any consultancies. Where we have used consultancies, that actually tends to be on our major alliances rather than integrations or transitions where we're moving assets to integrate to someone else. But no, we don't use consultancies. External support comes predominantly from the IQVIA colleagues we mentioned. And they're typically, I mean, that's a flexible resource, so we flex up and down that resourcing dependent on need.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that. And now, final question, Emma, then we are done. In terms of the workload, do you have standard metrics, KPIs for the number of projects by person in your team?
No, it's one of those things that fluctuates. We try to, if you kind of remember that crude graph that I showed with all the efforts, we try to assign projects based on giving people a spread across that spectrum of where they are with their projects. So it really does depend, but yeah.
Okay, and this question has been asked by Mark Faber from Sanofi, just for your information. Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Mark.
All right, so with this, Robert, can you give us guidance as to when we're going to meet again?
Yes, thank you for a great presentation, Emma, and we will reconvene at 11:30 for the next session. So we have now the virtual coffee and the networking. Just a reminder, in the chat area, there's a link for the online evaluation form, so you can fill that out when you have a chance. And I also am sending an invitation to the Thought Leader Global social network. It's sort of like a mini LinkedIn without the headhunters and sales pitches. So please join that if you'd like to get more community. We have 600 plus members. We're going to try to get it up to 1,000 soon. And it's completely free. But thank you for your attention for this excellent presentation. And now we enter the coffee break. So pick a chair, click on a chair, or do the matchmaking and meet each other, and we reconvene. It's 30 after. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.